first, I'll just give you an overview, and we'll just take a look at Tableau 9 and see how it looks similar, how it looks a little bit different maybe than what you're used to. So it's still in beta, hasn't been released yet, but I think we're getting close. So in the past they've had maybe 6, 7 releases of the beta, and we're on beta 8 right now, so sometime this month probably. All right, so when I open up Tableau 9, the first thing you'll notice here is the new home screen. And I love this. It's slick. It looks nice. So in a lot of ways the same. You've got your thumbnails of workbooks that you've been working on. You've got some sample workbooks here at the bottom. But it's got a new connection screen, which is really nice. And we'll take a look at that. It's also got a little Discover panel over here with some getting started. Some of this was available before, but is laid out a little bit differently. Then this is new, the Viz of the Week. So you've heard of Viz of the Day. Well, now Tableau is going to pick out of the Vizes of the Day the Viz of the Week. And so every time you open up Tableau Desktop, it'll be there. You can click on it and see what's going on. Some blogs, forums, that sort of thing right there. But I love this home screen. It's so slick. If I resize it, notice that the thumbnails, they resize. The panels disappear. It's just slick. It's responsive and very cool. The new connection screen over here on the side. So easy access to things that you might use frequently, connecting to a file. So Excel, text, Access, those were all there before. You'll notice statistical files. So these are things like SAS files and R files. So if any of you are using those, now you can have a direct connection. Other files, so I can open up Tableau workbooks and that sort of thing by clicking other files. And then this is nice. If I'm connecting to data on a server, it's going to list out the most frequently used connections here. So I've connected a lot to Tableau Server, Google Analytics, Microsoft SQL Server, maybe a few more. Those are my most frequent. Now when you guys start using it, it'll be your list of most frequently used servers. So it'll be right there, easy to find, instead of that long list that you had to scroll through. But if you want to find a server that you haven't connected to recently, just click More Servers. And there's your long list, but now I don't have to go searching through it and scrolling through it. I can actually just type in a search, and as I type, I get a list of matches, and I can connect as needed. So I'll connect to SQL Server here. And this screen looks very similar to what you've seen before, but it has a few differences. So I'm going to connect to the sample Superstore data, but this time in SQL Server. And so in Tableau 8.2, we got this new interface where we can drag and drop tables. So that's the same, and that's really nice. I drag and drop, and it recognizes some things. It didn't recognize that one because I grabbed the wrong table. Well, that's interesting. So I'll tell it how to do that. Oh, because it's the same one. Let's try customers instead. So I drag and drop. Now, here's something new. So I always had the ability to preview, which was nice, and I had the ability to adjust columns and things. I could go into the tables and adjust them. But this new Manage Metadata is new. So if you remember back to like Tableau 7, when you had the wizard that would pop up and you had that list of columns and it was pretty easy to go down and rename things as you wanted, well, that's back. So it's the best of both worlds. You get the drag and drop interface, but you also get the ability to go down and see your metadata. You get to see what it's going to be called in Tableau. You get to see what it was called in SQL Server. And then you can switch back and forth and see the preview. And we'll take a look at some other options here in a little bit. I'm going to go to the sheet. So you'll notice the orange button in the middle has moved down here. It just says, well, when you're done with your data source, just click on the sheet that you want to start working on, and you'll be there. And then this all looks very similar. It's very much the same. So I get my list of dimensions, measures here in the data window, but a couple of new things. The first new thing that I notice is this little Tableau button here. I'm not sure what the official name of this is going to be, I call it the Tableau button. But if I click that, it toggles back and forth between the home screen and this screen. So I can just sit there and toggle all day if I want to. But an easy way to get back to maybe some saved data sources and maybe quickly connect to data. Although if I want to connect to data, I also have this little connect to data tab down here, my data source tab. And when I click on that, I'm back to my data source screen. And in fact, I can edit all of my data sources right here with this little drop down and add new data sources. And I can do all of that work right here without having to go to the menu and do all of that. So it's creating a nice flow for me. And then I can just switch back and forth between my sheets and my data sources and go back and forth. So really nice interface. And then another thing that you'll notice that's different is I've got my data window as a pane over here, but I've got a new tab. I've got an analytics tab. So we'll talk about this. This is drag and drop analytics. We'll see how that works. Other than that, not too much different in the interface except for a few things that we'll see as we go along. But the rest of it is kind of what you're used to, drag and drop. So I can start dragging and dropping fields. So I might take a look at something like sales by department and category and be able to see that. I might create another sheet here that has sales and profit. So we'll create a scatter plot here, maybe again with category, maybe department defining color, and maybe we'll even take this one all the way down to the item level. So I get a nice scatter plot of all of my items. I get to see the correlation between sales and profit. Especially on a projector, one thing I like to do is switch my mark type to a circle, and then on the color, give it a little bit of a border to make them pop out there. Maybe, especially if there's a lot of marks overlapping, maybe bump down the transparency a little bit just to help them stand out if they happen to be behind another mark. All right, so that's all the same, but now notice this. Notice as I move the cursor, what do you notice happening here? Yeah, look at those tooltips. Yeah, you remember previously you kind of had to sit there and wait a second and then finally you'd get the tooltip to pop up? Well, now I've got responsive tooltips, immediately accessible. And then if I pause long enough or click on it, then I'll get my command buttons. But the great thing, and one of the things that I really admire about Tableau, the company, and the developers that work there, is that they may bring out a new feature like this, but they don't force you to stick with the new feature, because you may say, well, I liked the way the old tooltips were working in my dashboard. I don't want it to be new, so I click on tooltip and notice some new options here. The default is responsive, but I can switch it back to the on hover, the old slow to show method. I can even turn off tooltips now.
Sure.
Yes?
Can you change the timeout of the tooltip also?
Okay, so the question was, can I change the timeout? No, I don't have that fine of control of the timeout, but the on hover, which is the old, yeah, that would eventually time out. So notice there I'm dragging, hovering, and I have to wait. But the new responsive, they'll stay there. So if I go to my tooltip here and change it back to responsive, now I can just sit there and it will just stay. And this works on desktop, and if I publish this to server, I still get the responsive tooltips. So that's a really cool feature. All right, so you'll notice here I've got what I'm used to. I can create a new worksheet down here at the bottom. I can create a new dashboard, but I also have the ability to create a new story. So that's new. You used to have to do it from the menu, but now I can do it right here at the bottom. I'm going to create a dashboard first. Dashboards haven't changed a whole lot. There's not a whole lot that's new here, but there are some little things that make life a whole lot better. So how many times have you been creating a dashboard, and I've just got sheet 1 and 2, but sometimes I have sheet 7, 8, 9, 10, 14, 28, and I wish that I had named them so I would know what they were, because I don't know which one to drag onto the dashboard. Well, now I just hover over the sheet and it gives me a nice thumbnail. So now I know, oh, there's my scatter plot. That's the one I wanted. And again, the responsive tooltips there on the dashboard. And not only that, but thumbnails here too. So just hover over each one, even dashboards. So now this doesn't mean that I can be lazy in naming my sheets, but actually I can. So. All right, so a few other features. Before we go into story points, I'm going to create a map. So creating geographic visualizations in Tableau has always been fairly easy. Just double-click a geographic field, and there you are. And maybe instead of state, I want to go all the way down to city, and maybe even zip code or postal code here. That didn't change a whole lot. All right, so still got my responsive tooltips. Notice the new tools here on the map. So I've got my zoom in, zoom out like usual. I've got my pin map, so I can pin the location of the map so that if I've zoomed in or I've selected an area, it'll stay there. But I've got some new things. First of all, I've got this new search feature. So I just type in the name of a city or a location, and I can decide where to go. I didn't know there was a Dallas, Oregon, but I'm going to look at Dallas, Texas. And immediately, I'm there. And not only that, but the map will actually go to places that aren't in my data. So this isn't tied to my data. This is anywhere I want to look. So I might want to look at Australia or Austria. And there's Austria. I don't have any data there, but the map knows where to go just by searching. And then notice it's pinned the map to that location, but if I unpin it, it goes back to the best fit for the data. I've got a few other options here as well. So I've got my ability to draw a rectangle and zoom to an area. That's been there before. The ability to select marks with a rectangle, yeah, that's been there before. But I have some new options too. I have a radial selection. So ever wish that you could just select a point and then select out based on that point? And I also have a lasso selection. So now I can just freehand a selection, get the points that I want. So I'm not stuck to that old rectangle. I still have it if I want, but I have some other options as well. All right, let's dive a little bit deeper. So I'm gonna close out here. Oh, actually, before we do that, one more thing: story points. So story points was new in 8.2, and story points allowed me to create a story. It allowed me to take multiple dashboards, multiple views, and create a story with that. So I could take, yeah, this is nice. I can see my sheets. I can take my map there, create a story point. Maybe this is just U.S. cities. Then I can create a radial selection and just keep those.
Question.
Yes.
On that radial selection, is there a way you can specify based off a certain diameter?
So no, currently there's not. It's possible future versions may allow that, but yeah, currently not. Yeah, so now I'll save this one as a new point in the story. So this was all here before, but what a lot of people didn't like so much about stories was that I was stuck with these rectangles up here. I didn't have a whole lot of options, and that takes up a lot of space. So what Tableau has done is given me a little bit more formatting options. So I can resize these rectangles. And now my story points can take up less space. I have a lot more formatting options as well. So if I format the story, I have even more options than what I had before. So new options with story points and formatting those. And that opens up a lot more possibilities in terms of making some stories that are nice presentations. All right, I'm going to close this one out. And I'm going to bring up something that happens quite frequently when you're working with Excel data. How many of you tend to work with Excel data that looks like this? So this is actually really nice in the sense that it's formatted so that I can read it fairly well. This one happens to be world population data. It's got a nice title there. It's got a note. It's got some color coding, which may help me read it. And you know, this is nice for me to read it, but if I took this into Tableau, I'm going to have problems. What kind of problems am I going to have? Yeah, headers, merged cells. I'm hearing a lot of the things that are going to be the problems. Yeah, so I've got a merged cell here. I've got another merged cell here. I guess another one, well, maybe not. But yeah, I've got multiple levels of headers. My real headers don't start here until row 6. So it used to be I would have to come into Excel, clean that up first, and then finally take it to Tableau. Another huge problem here is that I'm looking at world population. So population is my measure, but notice how that measure gets spread out along multiple columns here. So it's not just population per country, it's population per country per year. Well, I know that Tableau, I can use that, but I also know that it's going to be a lot easier to use in Tableau if I pivot that. So how many of you have used the reshaping tool that Tableau created for Excel? Yeah, that's great, unless you're using a Mac, because it doesn't work on Mac. It's also great unless you don't like to have to go to one tool, fix the data, and then go into another tool to actually work with the data. So what Tableau has done is they've taken all of that functionality and more, and they've taken it into Tableau. So I'm going to connect here to Excel. I'm going to connect to that world population data. Here is my connect to data screen. And yes, Tableau had some problems. It saw those headers and it thought, there aren't any headers that it can use, so we'll call them F1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. It saw those merged cells and it did the best it could, but it thought that those might just be part of your data. And then my actual headers here, that just got called a row of data. So that's problematic. But notice what I've got right here in the middle of the screen. It says data doesn't look right. No, in fact it doesn't. It says the Tableau Data Interpreter might be able to help. So I click Turn On, and now Tableau has parsed through that Excel file. It has recognized the merged cells, the excess headers, the excess footers, things that I didn't want, and now my data looks a lot better. I've got my actual headers here and my actual rows of data here. If I'm interested to see what it actually did, I can click this Review Results. That's going to create a new Excel document, and it's going to give me some color coding indication, and I can actually look at the data to see what did it do. So it found the headers, it got this as my data, and it's ignored this. So this is a great way for me to check to make sure, did Tableau actually get it right? And in this case, it did. So I close that. That's just a copy. That's not actual data. And here I am back in Tableau. Now I still have some things here in the data. It's done a good job, but I still have some things that are going to cause me some problems probably as I want to try to analyze this data. What sorts of things do you see? The years, yeah, so that's going to be problematic. Yeah, I don't want a column for each year. I really want that to be pivoted. Well, the great thing is that I can do that. So I'm just going to click here on the first column, scroll on over. I've got tons of columns for all the years. Looks like it goes all the way up to 2013. Hold down on Shift. So now I've got all my columns highlighted that I actually want to pivot into rows. And I'll just use this little drop down here and say Pivot. And here in Tableau, yeah, go ahead, clap. That's exciting. Yeah, so it's taken those, it's pivoted them now. Instead of hundreds of dozens of columns, whatever it was, I've got 2. Now I've got a whole lot more rows because it's taken all of that and created a row, and it's given me pivot field names and pivot field values. Well, I don't want that those names actually in my data, but right here on this dropdown, I've got the ability to rename, and I'll just call this my year, and I'll rename here, and I'll call this my population. All right, what else? What else do you see in this data that might be somewhat problematic? Yeah, so I've got country name and code, and I don't have multiple columns for that. I just have one column, and it's put together. That's not what I'm going to want. Tableau is not going to be able to recognize that as a valid country if I wanted to do geographic mapping. So what I used to have to do is create some sort of crazy calculated field with string manipulation, and it was awful. Now I just use the drop down here and say split that field out. Yeah, so how does it, it's magic. I don't know. No, it actually, so it's got some intelligence built into it. Lots of times you may have things separated with commas, with pipes, and so it's looking for delimiters. Here, it was actually smart enough to see that things were separated with a space, and then the next thing had parentheses around it and said, well, probably you want those parentheses stripped out, and so it actually did that. Now, I could have gone in, there's actually a custom split option. So if I see it myself and Tableau can't recognize it, I can work with it. Eventually, I may have to do some string manipulation, and Tableau's actually got some new cool things that we can do that we'll take a look at here in a little bit. But here, country name and code split 1, country name and code split 2. Again, I probably really don't want those names, so I'm going to rename this and just call it country and country code. And then I don't know who created this data set or why we've got the population total here and SP pop total. I don't know what even that means. I'm not going to want these columns. So right here, I'm just going to hide them before we even go to our worksheet. And now I've got a really nice data set that I can go to sheet 1. And you'll notice the things that I split out, the things that that were split, they're calculated fields. So I can actually edit those if I want, so you can actually see what it was doing. If I edit, it's actually, there's a new function called split, and it's splitting it out, and it knows to use this parenthesis here. It's doing some interesting things, but now my country actually works really nicely. I can change that to maybe a filled map of some kind, and I can start to do my analysis. So there's population. You take population off color. Now here's a really cool thing. So I'm going to switch my map. The maps are about the same, so I still have the same options here for light, normal, dark, that sort of thing. But I'm just going to switch it to a normal map. And one thing that I often want to do, notice again the tool tips, and it's also giving a border to anything that I hover over, which is kind of nice. But here on color, one thing that I might do is go to more colors and say that I want to get some more colors to choose from. Notice the new interface here for color. So a really nice way to select colors. But my favorite feature here, in addition to being able to input an HTML code for color, which is nice, but notice this button here, pick screen color. And now, as I move the mouse over the screen, yeah, now I can pick any color on the screen. So I'll just pick the color of the water, and that actually could be kind of a cool visualization there. Maybe.
Does it say those colors with the workbook now, or is that still not possible?
Yeah, so it does save the, I'm not exactly certain what all it does because that one seems to disappear if I come back into the workbook. I mean, it still knows if I come in here to more colors, it's still going to show it here. But yeah, and if I publish it to server, it'll remember the color, but it's not going to save it as a custom palette or anything like that. No, yeah, good question.
Does the data reshaping and the split only work with Excel data, or does it work with other?
That's a good question too. So yes, only with Excel. The split works with other things, but the pivoting and the data interpreter, that's an Excel feature. Yeah, good question.
I have one
Yeah.
question. So when the sheet is linked, right, the spreadsheet might be linked to the workbook, and when this original spreadsheet changes next day with additional data, all this transformation will happen automatically next time when we refresh it, or we have to do it again?
Yes, it should happen automatically because it is remembering how you've reshaped the data. So yes, if you extract it and you set that up on a refresh schedule, or if you've just got a live connection to Excel, then yeah, as the data changes, you won't have to go through that whole process again and again. Yeah, good question. Yeah, so once you start to get into that sort of thing, then it would probably just depend on if those new columns would interfere with the pivot, or yeah, you'd have to see how that would impact your data. Good question though.
One last question.
Yeah.
21 unknowns in the lower right-hand corner.
Oh yeah, so you get this when it doesn't know what to do with countries, and since this was sample data, who knows? We've got we've got some things in the data that weren't even valid as countries. But Tableau would let me map them if I wanted to, so I could tell it what I thought they might be. All right. Well, let me close out of this one and open up a workbook that I've got here. All right, so one of the features that is my absolute favorite feature of Tableau 9 is level of detail calculations. Anyone here of level of detail calculations? All right, this is my all-time favorite because what this lets me do is get around all the things that I used to do with table calculations. How many of you here love table calculations? Okay, I love table calculations. They're great. They're powerful. You can do all kinds of things with them. But the reason why you all laugh is because we all know that when they get too complex, all of a sudden you've got a nightmare to try to maintain it, to try to pass it on to someone else and explain what's going on. You're trying to do something, and all of a sudden you're dealing with things that you wish you weren't. So what level of detail calculations let me do is they let me do all kinds of things that I never used to be able to do before. So I've got three different kinds. I've got fixed, I've got include, and I've got exclude. And I'll give you just an example of each one. So you can see here, fixed, it calculates the aggregation at the level of detail specified by the list of dimensions, regardless of any dimensions in the view. So let me give you an example of that. If I go to our Superstore sales here, and I say, let's look at this by department and by category, and then we'll take a look at sales. So that's the sum of sales for each department and category. But what I can do is I can write a calculation that fixes that at the level of department. So I can create a calculated field lots of different ways. We'll talk about that. But here I'm just going to right click here and the dimensions say create calculated field. Notice the new interface here? Takes a little bit of getting used to, but once I got used to it, I loved it because it's got all kinds of really cool things. So this is my, we're going to call this my average sales by department. All right, so lots of cool things that you can do with this. You'll remember the old calculation editor. It had several boxes with lists in the bottom. It had your fields, and you could pick a field. It had your parameters, and it had your different functions. Well, the functions are still here, so I still got that. I can get rid of them if I want to. I've got this little arrow to give me even more room just to work. But my fields and parameters are gone. Well, that's not a problem, because what I can do is I can take any field or parameter or set or anything that I want from over here and drag and drop. And not only that, but I can take any text from the calculation and drag that and drop it into the view. And not only that, but I can move this thing around and work with my view even as my calculation is still up and running. So I can have this calculation up and going, and I can be hitting apply, and then I can be working on the view and changing it around. So I don't even have to close this thing. Yeah, and check this out. So the new calculated field, the level of detail. It's got the description of the syntax here. But what's really nice is as I start to type, notice the IntelliSense, the autocomplete. So I find the one that I want. It's fixed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, fix it at the level of department. So I'm going to drag department in here. And we'll call it average sales. So as I type, I can even get average sales. There's the field that I want. And I close it off. So level of detail calculations, they're enclosed in these curly braces. And then I tell it whether it's fixed, whether it's include or exclude. We'll talk about what those are. Then I give it the level of detail. So these are my dimensions. Here I'm saying this is at the level of detail of department. And then I give it the aggregation. So this is average sales. So I'll say OK here. And I get my average sales by department. Let's go ahead and switch this one to average just so we can see what the difference is. I'll put the average sales by department right next to it. And so notice what I've got here. I've got average sales by department next to average sales. Now average sales, what level of detail is that being computed at? Yeah, that's a department and category. But since I fixed the average sales by department at just the department level, you'll see I've got the same value all the way down. Well, this is kind of nice now because now I can do comparisons that I could never do before. Now I can immediately see which one of my categories is above or below the average for the departments for everything in that department. And so that makes it really easy. So there's my average. Now I could do this maybe with a reference line before, and so visually I could do it, but these calculations, they open up a whole new possibility. You'll see that there are other ways to write fixed. So usually I'll give it a fixed level of detail, and I'll say what's the level of detail that I want it to compute at. But I can just tell it fixed and just give it an aggregation, or I can even just put the aggregation in the curly braces, and that means do it at the level of detail of the entire data set. So I could say, what's my average sales within the entire data set? And that would allow me to do these comparisons. So before I'd have to write some crazy table calculations that might break the next time I bring something in or out of the view, or maybe do some crazy data blending. But now I just have these calculations, and I can do that right here. So include, what this means is that I can include dimensions that are not in my view. So here I've got department, I've got category. I might do something like say, well, how many items are in a category? So I'll just right click and drag and drop item, and the right click drag and drop allows me to choose right off the bat. I can say I want to do a count distinct of that item. So I can see, okay, bookcases has 30 items, chairs and chair mats has 51 items, That's actually really interesting. But what if I want to, what if I want to take category out? Well, now I'm getting the distinct count of items within the department, right? So furniture has 257. But I might have a question. What is my largest category within the Department of Furniture? What's my largest category within office supplies? So what I can do is write another calculated field, and I'll say this one is the number of items including category, and I'll put my curly brace around it and type include. I can hit tab to finish it out, and it's a category. I'll hit tab, and we'll do the count distinct of items. So this says even if category is not in the view, let's include that as part of the level of detail and give me the distinct count of items at that level of detail. So I'll say OK, and here's my number of items including category. I'll drag and drop that on here, and look what it's done. It's given me the number of items including category, and it's the same, but that's because I'm summing it up. But I can do all kinds of interesting things. I can change this from a sum to the maximum. And now I know that even though overall furniture has 257 items, the category with the most has 134. And so it gives me all sorts of ability to drill into even deeper levels of detail even within one view.
Can you show its corresponding check?
Oh yeah, so that's a great question. Can I do that? And I believe the answer is yes. So if I want to do that, what I will do is create another calculated field using that one. And here's where I'll mix them together. And I'll say if the fixed level of detail, we'll see if this even works. Oh yeah, sorry. So the question is can I actually show what the category is? So I know that the maximum has 134 items, but what is it? So what is my max? So I'm going to fix this first at the level of detail of category. We'll do the count distinct of, let me clear that out for a second, of count distinct of the number of items. You know what, we already have it, so let's just bring it in. Something doesn't, oh yeah, there we go. Something wasn't right. All right, so I'm going to count the number of items at the fixed category level, and then I'm going to see, does that equal the max of the number of items including the category? And it doesn't like that. Why not? Oh, because I have to sum this one. All right, so we'll see if this actually works. Max category. Let's hit apply in case we have to come back and fix it. So once I hit apply, here's the max category. And in fact, what I really want is actually want to know what the category is. So I'll say if that's true, then let's actually get the category. Yeah, let's do this. Let's start with seeing if it even works. Oh. All right, so here's the problem with going off script. Yeah. Let me come back to this one, because it's a great question. But I'll be sitting here all night in front of you, sweating, and wondering if I can do it. But the answer is yes. Thank you, Matt. The answer is yes. That's what I should have said. Yes. Yes, you can. All right. So what are some practical examples of these? Other than that one, which I'm not going to do. All right. So I've got a dashboard, a very simple one, that just shows the visits per week on my blog. So vizpainter.com, shameless plug, check it out. But here's just a simple thing that shows me, here's my visits per week, and I can see here are the different blog posts that I've had. So I've even set it up to where if I click on a week, it'll show me which blog posts were popular that week. So I can see my visits, and then I can see how many page views did each one have. But here's a question. Once I click on this, I'm losing the context. So I see how many things happened that week, but what is that of the overall whole? So I can see when I click on the most recent week here that the 9.0 level of detail post was really popular. But was that week most of my visits to that page, or was that some of the visits? So I can use level of detail calculations to say, let's take a look at it within the context. I'm going to go to the sheet here, and I've got my post here. I'm going to take the action off just for a second. So here are all the blog posts. Here are all the number of visits that I've had for all time. So nothing filtering it except for some pages that I didn't want to show. And what I really want to know is, here's the number of visits, the number of page views, but how many page views were there overall? So I can do that with a level of detail calculation. So I'll right-click page views, and I'll say create a calculated field. And what I'll do is I'll say how many page views were there per blog post. And what I'll do is I'll say, let's do a fixed, so curly brace, fixed level of detail at the level of detail of blog post. And let's do the sum of page views. And it says that's good, so I'll say that OK. And I'll bring that over here next to sum of page views. And you'll notice they're the exact same right now. So page views per blog post, 4,200 something, and page views to the 4,200 something. So I come back to my dashboard. And now, notice what happens when I click a point. So I'll click that last point again. Now I'm getting something slightly different. All right, and we'll clean it up just a little bit to make it a little bit more obvious what's going on. But look at that top one. My page views for that final week were only 627. But the filter didn't eliminate the fact that I can still see that there were 4,253 page views overall. So that fixed level of detail is fixing it, and the filter isn't changing it. So now I can get things within context. So I'll go back to my view and maybe clean it up a little bit. So let's keep the sort by the page views overall, and let's maybe make it a dual axis. Maybe change the colors a little bit. There's my new color editor. I'll make it a little bit lighter gray. And, well, let's see. I need to synchronize my axis on a dual axis. But now look what I've got back on my dashboard. Now I've got the ability to select any week. And I get to see, here's what happened on that week in blue, but here's what's happened for all time on the gray. And that would have been very difficult to do with any version prior to version 9. All right, any additional questions? Yes?
So, does it all, do you have any flaws with a filter around these level of detail calculations?
Yes.
Or can always use the entire data set?
So, okay, so the question is do you have any control over the filter? So, right here, the filter is not filtering out anything. The fixed level of detail calculation is fixed for the data set. It's going back to the entire data set. How can I control it if I actually wanted to filter it? So maybe, let's see what I could filter it on. I've got this refer. Let's show a quick filter on that and see what we've got there. Well, that's actually not all that helpful. Yeah, we don't want to do that. All right, let's see if we've got any hidden fields that we can use. Show hidden fields. Oh yeah, maybe here we go. Okay, country region. That will be a good one. We'll unhide that. We'll show a quick filter there. And we'll bring that into the dashboard here. So let's show our filter. Quick filter, country region. All right, and I'll apply it to all the worksheets here. So I'll say apply to worksheets. Let's select everything on the dashboard. So now, as I filter things, right, and maybe let's find, I think the United States looks at it the most. But yeah, again, that's not going to filter the actual values here until I go into the view and I take whatever filter I want to actually impact the level of detail calculations, here country region, and I say add to context. Once it's part of the context, now when I exclude the United States, now I'm going to see, okay, my page views for all the countries except for the United States is 2007. And other filters that are not part of the context, so the week, they don't impact that level of detail. Yeah, so great question.
A lot like sets.
A lot like sets. Very, very similar. Yeah. All right, any other questions on level of detail calculations? These are, I think, a game changer for Tableau, and I think I've barely scratched the surface of what they're capable of. I'm sure many of you will find all kinds of ways to use them that other people haven't even thought of yet. They're going to be incredible. So level of detail calculations are really neat. All right, one final thing that is maybe a little bit technical, but is also exciting, and that is how many times, let's see, so I'm going to connect to data, so I go to my data source here, use my drop down, and I'll say add new, and I'm going to pick out another Excel sheet called horrible data. How many of you have worked with horrible data? All right, so this isn't too horrible. There's only 2 columns here. Looks like a full name and a column named horrible data, which isn't too promising. So I come in here. Here's my horrible data. I'm going to look at my full name. I'm going to look at the horrible data. All right, so that horrible data certainly is horrible, because what I'm seeing here is that I've got maybe some addresses with maybe some phone numbers and maybe another address at the end, and my boss comes to me and says, I want that phone number. I want to see that in Tableau. Get rid of all the other stuff around it. All right, any thoughts? How would you get rid of this? Oh, I heard several things. What? Regex, yeah. So regular expressions. How many of you have used those before? How many of you love them? I saw more people have used them than love them. Guess what? In Tableau, they are going to help us so much, because when you see data like this, you don't have to worry. Now, before, I would have thought, well, maybe I can do some string manipulation. The phone number has a parenthesis, so I'll look for that parenthesis, but then I see, oh, wait, there are parentheses elsewhere in the data, so it's not going to be that much fun to look through this data. So what I'm going to do is I'm not a regex expert. So I like to take maybe just a little bit of this data and let's view it and just grab that horrible data. We'll copy it to the clipboard because what I'll do is come and find a regex tester of some kind. So I'll just Google that, come in here to regex. I'll paste my horrible data in. Maybe get rid of that first column there because all I care about is the data. And then I'm going to try to find a regular expression that finds that phone number. So I cheated up front and memorized it. We'll see, I hope. But I'm going to escape the parenthesis because it's a regular expression special character. So I escape it, and there it's found that first parenthesis. And then, but it's also found some parentheses I don't want. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, I know I want some numbers. So I'll say anything 0 to 9. Put those in brackets. Okay, that gets the number, but it also got this number here, this 32 that I don't want. Well, so I want 3 of those. Now that's looking better. And then I want a closing parenthesis, so I'll escape that. And then I want a space. And then 0 to 9, we'll take anything that matches 0 to 9, and we'll do that 3 more times. And then we'll do a dash. And then 0 to 9 again. This time I want 4. Now I'm finding that phone number. Well, this is great, but if I'm using anything prior to Tableau 9, it's not going to help me. But fortunately, in Tableau 9, I'm going to copy that regular expression, come back here, and create a new calculated field. But now, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go to the data window to create the calculated field. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create it right here. I double-click on my rows, and look at this. I can actually type a formula right here. So I'm going to type my regular expression. There's all the different formulas. So I have an extract. I can extract an nth, a match, or replace. I could actually go to the calculation editor and find out what that is. But let's do the extract. All right, and then it tells me it wants a string, and then it wants the pattern. So my string is the horrible data. And comma, and then I give it the pattern. Well, one thing I learned in Tableau is that what it wants in the pattern is it wants whatever you want to match in parentheses. So I can give it a whole thing to match, but I can say, well, what I want you to extract is just what's in the parentheses here. I want it to extract the whole thing, so I'll put that in parentheses. So there's my regular expression, and we'll see when I press enter, does it work? It did. So this where I double click, this is called an ad hoc calculation. I can do that anywhere. I can do it on columns, I can do it on rows, I can do it here on the marks card. I can double click and I can just start typing and type in a calculated field. It's really great for just doing something ad hoc. So I don't have to create these calculations and store them in the data. They can actually just be stored with this visualization. So I'm not cluttering up my list of fields with calculations that are only used one time. But if I decide this is a calculation that I'm going to want to use over and over again in other views, and I don't want it to be named this horrible data field, that's a horrible name, I'm going to take that field and just drag it over to the data window and drop it. And it didn't work. We'll try again. There it is. And it tells me I can rename the field. So this is my phone number. And now I've got that as a calculated field in my dimensions that I can reuse over and over and over again. And it's given it a nice column name as well. So that's regular expressions. Anyone excited about regular expressions now? Yeah. Good. Good. All right. One last thing to show you. Analytics, drag and drop. All right, I'm going to switch over to a data set here that is a real estate data set. So we've got some houses, we've got some addresses, we've got some measures here like area, I think it's in square feet, how many beds and baths does the house have, the price, how many days has it been on market. One thing that I might be interested in is just seeing how does the square feet, how does the area of a house, how does that impact the price? So I'll take the price, and I'll take the area, and then I'm going to take each address, and we'll put that just on the level of detail so that I get a mark for each house. And I can see, okay, here are some houses. Here's one that is about 3,500 square feet, and it's got a price of $109,000. Sounds like a pretty good deal to me. I might want to check that one out and see what's going on. I might also want to see some other things like the type. What type of house it is. So what that means, is it a foreclosure? Is it for sale by owner? Is it a realtor sale? So, that's a foreclosure. Okay, that might explain some things. All right, and I come in here. I'll change it to circle so we can see it on the projector a little bit better and give it a border so they pop out. All right, now what are some things that might help me understand the correlation between area and price? P-value, okay. What would give me a p-value? A trend, yeah. So I'm going to switch over here to the Analytics tab, and now notice all the different things that I have. I have lines like average and constant lines. I have box plots. I have totals. That one's grayed out here, but if I was working with a table or a bar chart or something like that, I could drag and drop totals. I have trend lines, averages with 95% confidence intervals, reference lines. So all kinds of different things that I can drag and drop. So notice when I drag and drop something, here's a box plot. It's going to say, where do you want to drop that? Do you want to drop it on area, on price, or maybe even on the whole table? So I might say, well, let's drop it on the area. There's a box plot. That might be kind of interesting. Probably not for this visualization, so I'll drag it and drop it off. So remember how you used to have to right-click the axis and go into these wizards and everything? Now, drag and drop. So drag and drop. I can do things like average lines. So I'll take my average line and drag and drop that, and see, now notice it's telling me, do you want to do this? What scope do you want to do it in? And also what axis do you want to use? So I can choose one axis. I could say, let's do it on the area. There's my average for area, 2,500 square feet. I'll drag that off. Maybe I wanted it on price, or maybe I wanted it on both. So I'll drag the average line back out, and I'll say, let's put that on price and area at the same time. There's both averages. And now I click a reference line, and there's all my options for editing, formatting, removing the line. I can even change it right here from average to anything else, minimum, maximum, and so on. And notice what else Tableau does. So it draws the lines just like it used to for everything that's plotted, but watch what happens when I select certain plots. Now, I still see the overall averages. Back there, they're sort of grayed out, but I see the new averages for what I've selected. So this allows me to do some really cool things just on the fly, find out what my averages are, what my confidence intervals are. So any of these analytics, whatever I select, there's my new lines. And it's all based on what's out there. So if I take one of these away, and now I select some marks, well, I get the average line that's there. So I'll take that average line away. All right, so someone said, yes, question?
We just bought Tableau a few weeks ago, so this is brand new to us.
Yeah.
If I want to know what the addresses or the actual homes that make up that average price for what you highlight, is there a way to get that level of detail?
Yeah, so if I select something and I say, you know what, I actually want to take this and maybe do a tabular report or something like that, one really easy way is to come in here and say create a set. So whatever I've selected, I'll just create a set of those. That'll appear over in my data window, and now I can go and use that in another view. So yeah. Or another possibility is just to view the data. So whatever I selected, there's all the addresses. Yeah, and so that's actually probably even easier. All right, so someone said p-values, and then they said, let's get some trend lines going. So here's a trend line. All right, and as I start to drag the trend line out there, notice it's going to give me my options in terms of what kind of a trend model do I want to use. So it used to be I'd right-click and say trend, and it would just default to linear. Well, that's still an option, but now I might say, you know what? I think this is more logarithmic. Whoa. look at all those things going on there. Let's clean this up a little bit. So I still have the option of coming into trend lines, so I can still right-click and edit the trend lines like I used to. And you know what? I don't want to see it by color. Now the confidence bands, that's fine. We'll keep that. So here's a nice logarithmic trend line, and what I'm saying there is that I think that as area goes up, prices increases, but there's going to be some sort of a law of diminishing returns out there. I can only build a house so large before people are not going to pay much more per square foot, and so that would be what I would be saying there. But I might say, you know what? I think it's exponential. And I think that the more square feet I add onto my house, the price goes up exponentially. And how many of you think that that's true? Probably not. Don't try that. That's not true. Now, interestingly, p-value is still pretty good there, but I might need some more data to really verify that. Or I might say, you know what? I think it's actually more of a polynomial thing. So at first, people will pay more for a bigger house, but at some point that levels off. And so maybe it's a little bit more complex. But these trend models are so much easier to get to now. So I used to have to go in and edit, and I had to pick which one. Now it's all just drag and drop. And again, very easy to click and say, let's edit, and all my different options in terms of showing the confidence bands. And notice too, as I do things here, it's working behind the scenes. So that's new as well. All right, I think that pretty much wraps up all the new features that I'm going to show you now. There's a lot behind the scenes that I haven't talked about. So we could talk about query fusion and how Tableau is taking all the queries on a dashboard and deciding can it do it in one query instead of three for 3 different visualizations. We could talk about parallel query processing and all the speed enhancements that are going on, but I won't bore you with that tonight. But I will take any questions if any of you have them. I'll stick around for a little bit afterwards and catch up with you too. So, any final questions? Yes.
Analytics features like where you were highlighting, does that translate to server?
That is a good question. I don't know right off. I don't believe so, but I don't know. Yeah, good question. Other questions? Yes?
Electrical detail calculations behind the scenes, is it pull those all together as a separate query and then join it up somehow?
Okay, yeah, so the question was level of detail calculations, is it doing a separate query? And so I believe the answer is no. I believe it is doing it in a single query. Now it's a rather complex query, but no, it's not running multiple queries to do that. It's actually doing it in some sub-selects and that sort of thing. So yeah, good question.
On your blog post, again, your example, has anything changed with pages functions to be able to kind of show the progression of time, like how the blog has been hit for so many months?
Oh yeah, so paging with the blog, yeah. So interesting that you should bring that up because I actually have a really cool viz that shows that. Nothing's changed, but just because you brought it up, and just because it's one of my new favorite things to look at. So let's see if I can find it. This might be it. Yeah, so here it is on a page view. So as time goes on, you can see new posts coming, and they're growing there, and so you can see what's going on. At the beginning, not too many people were looking at the blog. Wasn't all that popular. Still not all that incredibly popular, but it's getting there. But it's kind of interesting. You can see things kind of growing here. So dynamic annotations was kind of popular.
Just part one.
Just part one. Google Analytics, I had a blog on that showed how if you have multiple Google Analytics accounts and you wanted to put them all together in one viz, that one's been pretty popular over time. People have started to look at that.
Did you put a reference line on there for when you became a Zen master?
No, that's, I'll have to do that. Yeah, no, I have to do that. Yeah. And then this one, sheet selection. So being able to swap sheets around based on parameter selections and stuff. That's
Actually had a pretty good question. So like, say
Yeah.
we had an event happen in the organization that we want to be able to have a trend line that says, okay, maybe we had a major acquisition or
Yeah.
maybe a divestment. You know, I'd be curious to see.
Oh yeah, certainly. So you can definitely put, yeah, you can just add a constant reference line on a date. So if you knew a certain date and you had a date as an axis, and now with the drag and drop analytics, just drag and drop that reference line. Or if you're using the old version, just right click the reference line and say add, or the axis and say add reference line. Yeah. So.
What is it about sheet selection? Oh,
Yeah, so you can see there. Well, that is a period of time where I didn't have any data. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it was kind of interesting. There were some here that shot up, so I had a choose your own adventure and a blackjack and people like that. Now watch this one. Is 9.0 popular? Yeah. Yeah. So within less than a month, it was more popular than any of the other posts. So, yeah. But I could tell by the size of the crowd. It's not me. It's 9.0 that you all came out to hear about. So yeah. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
Can Tableau connect to Hadoop?
Yes. Yes, it can. So if I come in here to my data source screen. Oh wait, I don't want Google Analytics. Data, new data source. Yeah, and I search for Hadoop. Yeah, you'll see it's got multiple different possibilities for Hadoop.
Are all these available in Reader?
Yeah, so not the authoring components, but everything else that we've looked at, yes. Yeah. So yeah, the question was, is it available on the Reader? Okay, so question of can level of detail calculations go across multiple data sources? You mean like with blending or? Correct. It's a good question. I have not experimented with that enough. I believe the answer is no, but I don't know that with 100% certainty. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you guys out. I'll let PJ come up and close us out. But thank you so much.